Mayday here. 82, we have smoke in the cabin.
Good evening and welcome to Galactic Terrors for December 2021, the online reading series that scours the known universe for scary stories, strange tales, weird horror, dark humor, and all sorts of literary oddities and grotesqueries from the weirdest, wildest, most imaginative authors writing in a variety of fascinating genres, or at least the authors that will agree to come on the show. Tonight, our readers are Sephirah Giron, Tim Waggoner, and by a very special presentation of a recording of a reading from Lisa Mannetti that we will talk a little bit about before we move on. And joining me as co-host tonight, of course, is Carol Gyzander.
Speaking of oddities, here I am.
Awesome to see you, Carol.
Great to see you, Jim. Terrific. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. You know, one thing that we'd love to have you do as you're watching is let us know in the chat where you heard about our show tonight. That helps us figure out how our outreach is going. I know this is a really busy month, so thank you to the folks who have taken time to come in and listen to us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We know everyone's got a million things going on this time of year, but it's great if you can take a little time to enjoy some weird, dark, entertaining fiction.
Mm-hmm. That's good anytime.
So a few things of interest before we get on with our readings. StokerCon 2021 is coming up in May StokerCon 2022 is coming up in May of 2022. There we go. I'm getting the years confused now. It's like everything after March of 2020 is just one big Doppler shifting line of calendar.
I just call it Blur's Day. Everything is Blur's Day.
But that will be taking place in Denver at the Curtis Hotel. And you can find out more at stokercon.com, where you can also register and make hotel reservations and things like that. The rates go up by $50 after December 31st. So if you are thinking of going, now is a great time to register, and we'll be offering a couple of different options for attending StokerCon. You can go in person, you can go virtual, which will be online, or you can do both and get kind of the best of both worlds. And another thing that's coming up on a deadline related to StokerCon is the Scholarship from Hell. So this fun little scholarship is for horror writers who are looking to kind of get started, get their feet under them, learn about the craft. And the recipient of the Scholarship from Hell gets transportation to and from StokerCon, room at the hotel, access to the convention, and one of the best parts, they get to attend all of the Horror University workshops. And Horror University is our series of intensive, I should say, workshops with masters of the genre, looking at all different aspects of writing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love all those programs, and I want to do everything, every minute, all the time. So that's why I'm glad there's a hybrid option as well. Very cool. Terrific. Well, there's some other things that are coming up. HWA has now announced the Summer Scares reading program for 2022. I had to say that carefully, Jim, because
yes.
But it's a really cool program. HWA partners with several groups, United for Libraries, with Book Riot, and with Booklist. And the Summer Scares reading program, it gives libraries and schools a recommended reading list for people in the horror genre, and recommended titles for either adult young adult, teen works or middle grade readers. And it's a great way to introduce both the readers and the librarians to new authors. And, librarians are some of our best friends as writers. So it's a great way to get the word out to them about, the books that are coming up, and get people talking about the books beyond, just, oh, what'd you think? What'd you think? So if lots of people read the same book, then people can talk about it. So that's a great way to get the conversation going and promote some reading. I think it's a terrific program.
Yeah, it is. It's been growing each year, and it does a wonderful job with connecting libraries with some excellent horror fiction.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is the 4th year. I can't remember if I said that. So I think that's cool.
Yes.
It's growing.
And just another bit of, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carol.
One more thing. We have a spokesperson for 2022. Alma Katsu is our spokesperson for Summer Scares reading program.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Another bit of HWA news is the recently announced addition of a middle grade novel category for the Bram Stoker Awards. So over the last few years, we've heard from a lot of authors that middle grade is a growing area for horror fiction. Middle grade readers are looking for horror, and then a lot of publishers are producing more horror in that area. A lot of authors are writing more horror for middle grade readers. And so we've added a category for that will take place, will sort of initiate in 2022 for the 2022 award season. So any middle grade horror fiction published in 2022 will be eligible for a Bram Stoker Award consideration.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, one more thing that we could also tell everyone is that we have a newsletter that we send out every month, except this was a crazy month. But
Yes.
yeah, I think Thanksgiving hit and life went crazy. But we don't spam people. We just give information about the shows that are coming up each month. And so we have the link there on the screen, and in a little bit we can put it in the chat if you want to click on it. People are welcome to join us on our newsletter.
Yes. And if you don't sign up for our newsletter, and I don't know why you wouldn't, just remember that we do Galactic Terrors every second Thursday of the month. You can find us here with some excellent readings to offer. And you can also click below to subscribe. As they say, like and subscribe to follow our YouTube channel. All right. So we're going to jump into our readings in just a minute. I wanted to give a little context up front about our third reading tonight, which is from Lisa Mannetti. For those of you who don't know Lisa, she's an award-winning horror fiction author. She was a teacher. She's done a ton of great work in writing and horror in particular, and she passed away this past summer. So unfortunately, Lisa, who was a member of our New York HWA chapter, never got an opportunity to read with Galactic Terrors. But we were able to put together a video of a reading she did with the HWA New York chapter in October of 2016. This was our Halloween reading for 2016 at the Morbid Anatomy Museum in Brooklyn. The Morbid Anatomy Museum was an awesome place it was a museum dedicated to all things weird, grotesque, odd, and unsettling. You could buy teeth there at the checkout. They had a little box of teeth, and I forget how much they were, but they weren't expensive. And we had a lot of fun there doing these readings. Sadly, the museum closed just a few months after that last reading, and we haven't been able to ever get back there, obviously. But we do have this recording from Lisa. She reads a great story, and we're going to be playing that for everyone at the end as sort of an end-of-the-year treat, an end of 2021 treat, and a nice, hopefully nice homage to Lisa and all the work that she did and her great writing. So more on that a little bit later. I think now we should just go ahead and get on with the reading program. I'm sure that everyone's heard enough from you and me, Carol.
Yeah, that's probably true, Jim. I think so.
Great. So,
well,
all right.
Let me go ahead and introduce our first reader. Sephirah Giron has written over 20 published horror novels. She had 4 books published with Leisure Horror, 3 books with Samhain Horror Publishing, and 5 in her Witch Upon a Star series with Riverdale Avenue Books, to name a few. She also has several short stories out in the world, the most recent being found in the Pulp horror book of Phobias 1 and 2, as well as Amazing Monster Tales and Creatures in Canada. The novellas, A Penny Saved and Experiments in Terror, are now also available on the Scream Thrills and Chills app. She has spent the pandemic working on screenplays for movies and TV shows with the hope that one day a producer will see them and like them enough to bring them to life. When she's not writing, you'll find her playing video games or giving tarot readings or reading from her own work on her Twitch TV channel as Sephirah666. And her website is sephiragiron.ca. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing tonight? Thank you so much for having me here at Galactic Terrors. I'm really thrilled to be here. I will be reading a super abridged taste of my novella called Gilda and the Prince, which you can buy right now on Amazon for a whole $1 and read along with me. So let's get to it. Also, a lot of it's abridged because of YouTube, and then also just a very short taste of what is happening. Gilda and the Prince. The tissue crinkled beneath her trembling fingertips as she pulled it away from the object in the box within a box. Mounds of bubble wrap, twist ties, cable ties, and bits of cardboard were strewn across the narrow living room parquet floor. Gilda's heart pounded and sweat dripped from her forehead. She had waited so long for this day, and at last it was here. She pulled the tissue back to see large brown eyes staring at her from a human head. She laughed, pulling paper away from the long black hair that was carefully protected under a clear plastic shell. She held up the head, studying it as she spun around the living room. "You're here at last! I can't believe it!" She took one more spin around the room and then carefully placed the head on the sofa. "This is amazing! Absolutely amazing!" she sighed as she continued to unpack her parcel. About 4 hours later, Gilda looked at the life-size doll sitting on her couch. She studied the manual, double-checking that she'd assembled him correctly. "What an age we live in," she said to him. Who could ever imagine? It had taken her 2 years to save up for the custom-made companion, designed like her favorite character, the Prince of As It Is from Soran. It took some discipline, but her curiosity about the APMSSPAC was greater than the temptation to go shopping and drinking. She had also received a discount for being the first to try the AP2 MSSPAC. Adam Phase 2 Model Specialty Soran Prince of As It Is Caucasian. The AP1 MSSPA, Adam Phase 1 Sex Companion Model Specialty Entertainment Line World of Soran Character Prince of As It Is, and the EP1 MSSA, Eve Phase 1 Sex Companion Model Specialty Entertainment Line World of Soran Character Anita, had been discontinued because of some design flaws. Gilda had Googled to see what these design flaws might have consisted of, since the saleswoman Belinda had no comment. All Gilda found were ads requesting people to return the last 9 models of AP1 MSSPAC for replacement or refund. Condition of the product was inconsequential. What was the flaw? What had happened? Every now and again, she'd poke around on the interwebs, but she couldn't find anything at all about any of the models, except for 4-star and 5-star reviews on consumer sites. The outfits and footwear were costly, much more than the regular clothes. However, they provided convenient straps, snaps, and pockets that regular department store wear wouldn't, so that he could provide his unique services. Since he was a specialty item, she had ordered a couple of outfits from the movies, complete with headgear and weapons. This'll be the best cosplay ever. So after all the waiting, all the decisions, all the money, he was finally here. All assembled, dressed in his black robes, his staff in front of him on the coffee table, he sat on her couch looking at the TV set. As if feeling her staring at him, he turned his head to look at her. His brown eyes were gleaming, pointing right at her, as if they could see. He blinked, his lips curved into a smile. "Hello, mistress," AP2MSSPAC said. "Hello, welcome," Gilda said, standing in front of him, shifting her weight from foot to foot. He raised one of his hands and patted the couch. "Come sit with me," he indicated. Gilda sat. "What would you like to do?" he asked. "We can watch TV for a bit," she said, looking into his eyes, trying to see if he could see. She only saw her own reflection staring back in his glass balls. "Whatever you desire, mistress," he said. He turned his head so that he was facing the TV screen again. Gilda sat beside him. His chest rose and fell as if he were breathing. He didn't whistle or wheeze, although apparently some people liked their companion to have a slight wheeze. It made them more human. Her salesperson had shared that she could add and subtract sounds and activities, such as wheezing and snoring, through a simple combination of codes that were in the online manual. She trembled. He was so lifelike. Not only lifelike, but he looked just like the Prince of As It Is from Soran, just as she had ordered. He reached over to take her hand. His fingers curled around hers. For a moment, she panicked. What if he grabbed her too hard and broke her fingers? His hand was warm, his covering simulated human flesh, and she even detected a slight pulse through his fingers. She looked at their hands, locked together. Her new companion, her new mate, created specifically to her taste. Finally here. She looked at the light hair on her hand and then looked at the darker hair along his hands. His thumb stroked her captive fingers gently, smoothly, exactly how she liked it. She stared at AP2MSSPAC's jawline and yearned to touch it. Why not touch it? He's here for me. He can't reject me. He would let me touch him. He's supposed to let me touch him. That's the whole point, right, nerd? She gasped with the idea of it. She pushed his hand away and stood up. He turned his head to look at her. There was a slight whirring sound until his head settled into position of staring up at her with intense brown eyes. His mouth pouted. I hope I installed his head correctly. Man, he's cute. Is something wrong, mistress? The prince asked her, his deep bass voice resonating through to her toes. I guess the word is overwhelmed, she said. How can I make you more comfortable? Would you like a back rub? AP2MSSPAC asked. Sure, she said. She turned sideways on the couch so that he could rub her shoulders. His hands pressed into her flesh, his hot breath on her neck. How can I feel his breath? Do I have to fill him up with water to make steam? Where does the breath come from? She relaxed into his strong fingers that sought out and expertly rubbed every aching muscle on her back. If nothing else, he was a $15,000 massage machine. His fingers pressed deeper, her anxiety seeping away. That feels good, she sighed. She let him rub her shoulders and back, but when his hands began to stray towards her breasts, she pushed him away. She stood up. No, wait. She realized she was trembling again. A pleasant warmth spread through her body. She drew her arms across her chest. He stood up. His eyes were dark, and his mouth was firmly set. He's tall, really tall. What's wrong? He asked, a harsh tone to his voice. I'm sorry. I just need to get used to having someone else in the apartment, she stammered. She paced away from him as he stood, his fingers whirring as they clenched and unclenched. It's not you, it's me. I'm programmed to please you. Let me please you. The words were practically spit at her. Gilda put out her hands. Whoa, hang on. Who said you're not pleasing me? I'm thrilled you're here. You're doing great. A plus, really. Why don't you just have a seat? I'll sit first, see? She quickly sat down. He looked at her, and his shoulders raised and lowered in a sigh. He sat with her. Holy crap, how is this better than dating? I didn't think this thing through. Then about a month passes and they get used to each other. They have a lot of sex because that's what he's for. And she likes to go for a lot of walks in the woods. So today she's out walking in the woods. The prince appeared in the clearing ahead. He turned to face her, and the way his head jerked up and down, she figured he was scanning her. Why didn't she just learn to turn him off when she went for her walks? The prince ran towards her, his cape flapping behind him, his helmet glinting in sporadic rays of sun slicing through the treetops. She turned off her MP3 and waited, ready to give him hell when he caught up. He ran faster. I didn't know he could go that fast. He was charging her like a bull. She realized that he wasn't going to slow down as he got closer, so she stepped aside from the path. He continued running towards her and scooped her up in his arms. Hey, she cried out as he continued to run. Hey, put me down. I'll be home soon. He didn't say anything as his legs carried them through the woods, bugs and twigs smacking her in the face. Hey, put me down, she banged on his chest as he continued on. She looked at his helmeted face and saw a crack in the mask. Then she looked at his chest armor. It seemed more dented and dinged than she remembered. Had he been in a fight before he came to her? His movements were noisier and jerkier than she remembered. Stop now, Prince, she commanded, but he didn't stop. Your Highness, your Specialness, hey, Prince of As It Is, stop. He's supposed to stop when I command him. Why isn't he stopping? Branches and leaves snapped and sliced at her face and arms as he ran deeper into the woods, off the path and further than she'd ever gone. Go back, Prince of As It Is. I have to get back to work. It's not playtime yet. He held her tightly. In fact, the more she struggled to pry his arms from her, the tighter he clutched her. He ran until he reached a hill, a mossy leaf-covered hill in the middle of the forest. What is this? Gilda asked. He walked the rest of the way towards the hill. As he grew closer, a door in the hill swung open with a series of beeps. What? He carried her into a dimly lit room as the door beeped shut behind them. He placed her down. The buzzing of many flies circled her head, humming in her ears. She swatted at them. Oh my, she said as she straightened herself up and looked around the cave. There were several cheap button lights from the dollar store stuck to the walls, casting a low yellow light. Gilda pulled her t-shirt over her nose in an attempt to avoid the horrible smell, a damp, salty odor of mold, or perhaps rotten fruit. What is this? As her eyes focused, she saw that there were other people in the cave with her. She looked at the shadows in the walls, at the glowing glassy eyes staring at her. Not people, princes. Many princes of As It Is. And she didn't think any of them were hers. So to find out what happens, if you can order Gilda and the Prince. And thank you so very much for having me. And thank you.
Thank you, Sephirah. That was great.
Thank you
for sharing that reading with us. Listening to that and starting to wonder, is it possible to envision a story, a sex robot story that doesn't involve the robot going awry?
I know. Oh, and I forgot to mention before I Reddit that I did write this story in 2017. So I know animatronics, especially when you read more of the story that I didn't read here, it's like, this is old. Like, what's an MP3? Like, you know, so I wrote it in 2017. So it's already super dated, but it's
Right,
still fun. But yeah,
Yeah.
going awry.
The whole concept around that, just, if you've seen the Terminator, I can't see how anybody could look at a sex robot with anything other than total dread.
Yep.
So, I was looking over your bio or listening as Carol read it, and I didn't realize you had published so many novels, over 20 novels.
Yeah, and there's some others that weren't mentioned, and some were ghost written and stuff like that too. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm chugging away.
Now, are all your novels horror fiction, or are you working in other genres too?
Most of them are horror. The Witch Upon a Star books are horror romance. They're mostly erotic, but they're occult, like witches and spells, and there's werewolves and vampires and stuff like that coming and going through the. It's a series. It'll ultimately be 12 books. So it's a series that takes place in a town, and there's 12 witches and all that. So things come and go. And then, like, one of the first books I ever had published was House Magic: The Good Witch's Guide to Bringing Grace to Your Space, which was back in 2001. And that was a nonfiction book about metaphysical things and how to organize your house. To, back then, people were just, things like feng shui and colors and all that. It was just kind of getting into the what everybody doing it kind of thing, as opposed to just specific, just witches, or just feng shui is just Asian people or whatever, right? But now so that book was incorporating all kinds of disciplines and ideas of positive energy and activating your life and all that. But yeah, so that was my only nonfiction book, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So now, is that stuff that you practice, or do you just do a lot of research?
At that time, I was doing a lot of research, and I do some things, but I'm not like crazy about it. If I was more anal about everything, things would be better. I don't know. But I will say that way back when that book came out in 2001, someone told me that they had seen a newspaper clipping of Britney Spears reading it. And now and again, I think about that, because I'm like, was that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, what did she do? But now she's free.
Right. So it all worked out in the end.
It all worked out in the end.
Now, of course, you'll probably make the mistake of going out and buying a sex robot. So,
Yeah, really. It'll probably be better for her than whoever she's going to marry next, right?
So we do have a question from the audience tonight. This is from Nicholas Dyack, and this is a multi-point question. So let's put it up here. And this is about tarot decks. Which is your favorite? Which has the best art? Which is the most unique? And which do you recommend for beginners interested in tarot?
Well, I do a lot of tarot readings, like parties and stuff, and I've actually been getting back to that last couple of months. I have a bunch of parties coming up. So when I'm reading tarot for clients, or when I have a course on Udemy, UDEMY, learn how to read tarot cards, I think is what I called it. I use the Rider-Waite deck, just your basic, the Easy Rider, it always looks so cool with the green screen.
Yes.
Look at that. You can't even see what
it's
it is.
Interdimensional.
But yeah, so the Rider-Waite is what I use for public or for, professional, because they're more Jungian, that the archetypes are easy to see, and the pentacle, like if you learn, when I learned tarot, I studied for 3 years with someone in a tarot. We went to tarot school every Friday. So we learned on the Rider-Waite deck. And then once you learn everything inside out, the numerology, the astrology and all that, then you can apply that knowledge to any deck. So I always say, even though you're using the stupid simple deck or whatever, but it's very loaded with information and stuff. And I find when I use other decks for professional readings, like at a party or whatever, people get all like sidetracked by what is this, what, you know, and it wastes time, and or they get freaked out by pictures or whatever. So that's the deck I tend to have on my desk. I tend to use it the most, but I have like tons of decks, and I don't really have a favorite, because every time I see a different deck, I'm like, oh, how cool. I love this. I love it. It's my best, you know, the favorite. I you know, there are only a few I've looked at where I'm like, nah, that doesn't really speak to me. But I think like if you're trying to buy a tarot deck, you know, I know there's all these rules, but I don't believe in any of those rules. It's like, just take what speaks to you. But certainly it's easiest to learn on the Rider-Waite. And I think almost every book written on how to read tarot uses the Rider-Waite. And so I would suggest doing that, because then once you get that base down, you know, because there's always numbers, there's always major and minor arcanas, you know, so you get those basics down, and then you can do whatever you want.
That's great. Do you use the tarot in your writing at all? I've met writers who use tarot to kind of develop characters sometimes. I wonder if you...
Yeah, like the Witch Upon a Star series. One of the witches is a tarot reader, but most of the chapters start with a tarot reading or an astrology reading or something like, oh, Knight of Cups is coming into your life today, or something like that. And what was the other part of the question? So I was just thinking of...
Oh, which is the best deck for beginners?
Oh, no. No, you just asked me about, oh, do I use it in my work?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Writing,
brain
developing ideas or characters. Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm losing my mind. Yeah, and then also on Udemy, UDEMY courses. I do have a course called How to Write a Short Story Using Tarot Cards. So I walk people through, like, you don't have to know anything about tarot, and I teach how to, like, you know, pull a card for the character traits, pull a card for the plot, and so we kind of work through that. And yeah, I do it a lot for myself. I just for fun. I don't always follow what the deck might say if I'm writing a story, but I do often, like, you know, pull things for fun, especially if I'm stuck, and see if it'll loosen up the brain to explore different directions and things like that.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again for the story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it. We'll have you on again at the end, and we'll have some time to talk about what you have coming up next.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next reader this evening is Tim Waggoner. Tim's first novel came out in 2001, and since then he's published over 50 novels and 7 collections of short stories. He writes original dark fantasy and horror, as well as media tie-ins. He's written tie-in fiction based on Supernatural, Grimm, The X-Files, Alien, Doctor Who, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Transformers, among others. And he's written novelizations for films such as Halloween Kills, Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, and Kingsman: The Golden Circle. His articles on writing have appeared in Writer's Digest, The Writer, and The Writer's Chronicle. He's the author of the acclaimed horror writing guide, Writing in the Dark, which won the Bram Stoker Award in 2021. He won another Bram Stoker Award in 2021 in the category of short nonfiction for his article, Speaking of Horror. And in 2017, he received the Bram Stoker Award in long fiction for his novella, The Winter Box. In addition, he's been a multiple finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award and the Scribe Award, and a one-time finalist for the Splatterpunk Award. His fiction has received numerous honorable mentions in volumes of Best Horror of the Year, and he's had several stories selected for inclusion in volumes of Year's Best. Hardcore Horror. He's also a full-time tenured professor who teaches creative writing and composition at Sinclair College in Dayton, Ohio. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here and ready to read a story to you. So several months ago, when Jim asked if I'd be interested in reading a story for Galactic Terrors in December, he said, do you have a Christmas story or a holiday story? And I don't usually write holiday stories for whatever reason. I had one, exactly one. I'm like, sure, I got one. And then Jim sent us an email about how to log in and how long the readings are supposed to be. And I realized the readings were only 10 minutes and my story was way too long for that. So panicking, I wrote a story this afternoon. So it's my second Christmas story. And this is the first time anybody's gonna hear it. So it's called Do You Fear What I Fear? Mommy, Santa's real, isn't he? You gaze upon the Christmas tree, antique glass-spun ornaments, blinking multicolored lights, gold garland, silver tinsel, mound of presents beneath. You're so caught up in the beauty of the sight, are luxuriating in it, that it takes you several seconds to realize that Lucas has spoken. You look down at your son and put a hand on his shoulder. Lucas is wearing the new pajamas he got last night, a Christmas Eve tradition from when you were a child. His PJs are red and dotted with tiny white snowmen, the cloth soft and warm to your touch. You smile. Whatever would make you ask such a thing? Some kids at school were talking about it at lunch the other day. They said believing in Santa is babyish and that everybody knows moms and dads are really the ones who give the presents. His eyes beg you to tell him what he wants to hear. Your smile falters. When you were Lucas's age or near to it, you asked your mother the same question. I guess you're old enough to know the truth now, your mother said. You feel your jaw clench in anger and you force yourself to relax. This is Christmas morning, after all, a time for happy feelings only. Of course Santa's real, you say. Never doubt it. Lucas grins. Can I start passing out presents now? It's tradition in your family that no one starts opening presents until everyone has theirs, and then you take turns opening them one by one. Lucas loves to be the present passer outer, not only because he gets to handle all the presents, but so he can make the process go faster. Sure, you say. Lucas whoops, runs to the tree, sits down, and grabs the first present closest to him. This one's Dad's. He pushes it aside, grabs another. This one's Mom's. Yay, here's one of mine. As Lucas continues sorting presents, your husband comes over and slips an arm around your waist. I love seeing him excited like this, Kenny says. Like you, he's wearing a robe, Christmas red like Lucas's PJs, and he's also wearing a Santa hat, just as he does every year. He holds a coffee mug with a cartoon reindeer on the side, and he brings it to his lips and takes a sip. He grins then, almost as much as I love seeing you get excited. Your mug is a cartoon Santa struggling to stuff himself down a chimney. You added eggnog-flavored creamer to your coffee, and when you take a sip, you sigh with pleasure. It's true, when it comes to Christmas, you always make sure to do it upright. The outside of your house is festooned with Christmas lights. A fire crackles in the fireplace, and Christmas stockings hang from the hearth. On the mantel, a scented candle burns, filling the air with a delicious scent of apple cinnamon. Alongside it, several nutcrackers and an elf on the shelf. The TV is tuned to a station that plays nonstop Christmas music, and there are holiday-scented soaps in each of the bathrooms. Tins of Christmas cookies sit on the kitchen counter, along with homemade fudge and packages of candy canes. Later, after you've finished opening presents, you'll put the ham in the oven and start working on the side dishes while Lucas plays happily, and no doubt noisily, with his Christmas lute. Life doesn't get any better than this. This is exactly how Christmas should be. Perfect in every detail. You hear a soft cracking sound like glass breaking, and Lucas cries out, "Ow!" He raises his right hand, looks at the back of it, then holds it out to you. "Mommy, what happened?" You pull away from Kenny and hurry over to your son. You put your mug on the coffee table, kneel, take Lucas's wrist, and bring his hand close to your face to examine it. A thin line runs from the base of his pinky all the way to his thumb. At first you think he somehow cut himself, but there's no blood. You press your index finger against the line, no, the crack, near his thumb. You're careful not to press too hard, but the skin gives way beneath your finger anyway, fragile as eggshell. Lucas cries out again, yanks his hand away from you, and cradles it to his chest. He fixes you with an accusing glare. "That hurt, Mommy." I'm sorry, sweetie." Your stomach flips, and you fear you're going to vomit eggnog-flavored coffee. This can't be happening, can't be real. People don't just break. The scent of apple cinnamon grows thicker then, becoming cloying and overwhelming like rotted fruit. The fire sputters, flares bright, and then dies. Acrid smoke curls from the charred log, and the stink of it burns the back of your throat. The music on the TV slows down. The singer's voice, being Crosby's, you think, becomes deep and distorted, and the lyrics to the familiar carol change, become sinister. The tree lights begin blinking frantically, their pattern erratic, and then, one by one, they burst with sharp little pops until the tree is dark. The garland falls apart, pieces drifting to the floor like autumn leaves, and the tinsel shrivels and turns black. The spun glass ornaments, which have been in your family for generations, lose their luster, become dull and dingy, before crumbling away to nothing. The tree itself turns brown and dry, branches curling inward like the legs of a dying spider. The present's wrapping paper fades, tears in numerous places, bows and ribbons fraying. You know that if you go into the kitchen, you'll find the Christmas treats you made spoiled, the ham in the refrigerator rotten and rank. This isn't happening, you tell yourself. I won't let it happen. Let's open our presents. You try to sound happy, enthusiastic, try to sound joyful, goddammit, but your tone is strained and manic. You grab the first present you see, not caring if it's yours or not, and try to unwrap it, but its substance has become soft as a rotting melon, and your fingers break the surface and sink inside. With a cry of disgust, you pull your hands free, fingers now covered with viscous, foul-smelling muck. You shake them hard, trying to get the shit off you, but it clings stubbornly to your skin. Mommy, I'm scared. You look at Lucas, see that his face, neck, and hands are fissured with dozens of cracks now. One of his eyes is bisected by a crack, and several of his teeth have fallen out and rest in his lap. He opens his mouth as if to say something else, but before he can speak again, he falls apart. His body collapses in on itself, his pajamas too, with a rustling sound like insect carapaces rubbing together, becoming a pile of shards no thicker or sturdier than the ornament's spun glass. No blood, no organs, no skeleton. Lucas was absolutely empty inside. No, you say, then louder, no! You feel Kenny's hand come down lightly on your shoulder. Sorry, sweetheart, he says. His hand slips away and you hear the dry rustling of his body falling apart like Lucas's. You glance over your shoulder at the pile of paper-thin shards that was once your husband, and you begin to cry. When you were a child, you'd loved Christmas more than anything. But when your mother told you the truth about Santa, something died inside you. Christmas was never the same after that. And what was more, you learned that you couldn't trust your parents. They lied to you about Santa, and if they could lie about that, what else might they lie to you about? And if they, the two people who were supposed to love you more than anyone in the world, couldn't be trusted, how could you trust anyone? The house melts around you like a washed-out painting, and for a moment your vision blurs. When it clears, you're no longer crying. You're looking at a small room with 4 blank walls. The place is furnished with an old couch, an equally old easy chair, a small flat-screen TV set atop a wooden stand, which is playing quite normal-sounding Christmas music, and a coffee table. Your Santa mug rests on its surface, half full of eggnog-flavored coffee. It's Christmas morning, this is your apartment, and you are alone. You've been that way for most of your life. You had no friends growing up. You never trusted anyone enough to let them get close to you. And you kept to yourself in college for the same reason. After you graduated and started working at the bank, you tried going on a few dates, but nothing ever came of them. As the years passed, you tried to convince yourself that your mother had done you a favor by telling you about Santa. An ugly truth is better than a pretty illusion, you'd think. But you've never been able to bring yourself to fully believe it. And somewhere along the way, you came to realize that your life didn't have to be empty. Not if you didn't want it to be. Not if you believed. And in the end, isn't that what Christmas is all about? Belief? Problem is, you can get started just fine, but you have trouble keeping it going. Your mother's voice always breaks through and ruins everything. Sometimes you're afraid you'll never be free of your mother's voice, that you're fated to always be alone, living within the prison of your own distrust. No, you whisper. It won't be like that. I won't let it. You close your eyes tight, furrow your brow, ball your hands into fists, and concentrate. This time it'll last. This time it'll be forever. After several moments, you hear the sound of a fire crackling and inhale the lovely, rich scent of apple cinnamon. You open your eyes and smile. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. All right, first it starts with Christmas, right? Then they get the tooth fairy lies going, and then it just goes on and on. Yeah, very cool, very cool. I can almost see that story going on and on as a cycle, that every time she wakes up, that's wonderfully creepy. Thank you for sharing that. and fabricating that for us. It's kind of interesting, if we think back. I think the tradition of telling ghost stories started way back before Christmas, even, I guess, right? So,
Sure.
maybe we all come together in the dark and huddle in the darkness. That's very cool. I do. May I ask you, do you write
Sure.
many other things in second person? People like it and they hate it. And what's your take on it?
Yeah, short stories I'll do in second person.
Yeah.
I've never tried anything longer. I'd like to do a novella someday. I just never gotten around to it. For some reason, when I write in first person, things just pour out of me like water. So I kind of save it as a secret weapon when I need it. I almost wrote it originally this way, but then I wrote it in first person this afternoon, and then I looked at it. And when I came up with the title, I was like, well, it says you in the title. Maybe I'll switch it to second person and see what I think. And so I just stuck with that.
Yeah, there were comments in the chat loving the title. Do you fear what I fear? That's awesome. That's awesome. Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, I am curious to know, between your own writing that you do, where you fabricate everything yourself, and the tie-in writing that you do, is it a very different process for you? We have a couple questions about that coming up. How does that influence your creativity when you're doing your own freeform versus tie-in writing?
Well, it's a lot more collaborative because you have to work with not only an editor like you normally do in traditional publishing, but there are people at whatever company holds the license to the property that you're writing about, who have things you can do and can't do. You have to do first you do a pitch, and if everybody likes that, then you do an outline, and if they like that, then you can write the book. And usually you have to do revisions all along the way, to the pitch, to the outline, to the finished book. So the process itself is very different. And plus it's work for hire. You don't own anything that you do. So if you create anything, the studio, whatever, they own it, and you just know that going in. It's no different than if you were writing an episode of a TV show, that you don't own anything. The whatever studio, owns Supernatural. They're the ones that would own anything that you would create in that episode. And it's the same way with tie-in books.
Okay. Well, we have a question from Michelle Brittany. Her first question, is there a franchise that you haven't written for, but would love to write for?
I love to write Kolchak the Night Stalker because I grew up watching those.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be great. Star Trek, I'm a big Star Trek fan. I've pitched out Star Trek ideas to different editors over the years as they've kind of, one transitioned out and a new one came in, and haven't managed to hit anything yet there. But I think that would be great just because I grew up with Star Trek.
Do you follow all the Star Trek shows and such?
All of them except the 2 cartoon ones now. I tried both of them, didn't like them too much.
That's fair. No Baby Yoda, huh? No,
Baby Yoda I like. That's Star Wars.
That's Star Wars.
Baby Yoda's awesome.
Yeah. But cartoons are different. Yeah. Well, she has another question for you as well, speaking on the same topic. Michelle says, I recently read your Children of Anubis novel for Supernatural. It was a fun read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, she says. What research did you complete in preparation for writing it?
Lord, I don't know. Probably not it's hard to remember. It was so long ago. Probably not a lot. Researched a little bit about Egyptian myths. Anytime I have to do things regarding like weapons, I double check. Even though I've written about weapons before, they just slips my mind because I don't always have weapons in stories. So I double check that. I always set my Supernatural books in a particular, like between 2 particular episodes in a season. And I need to go and look to see what happened before and what happened after. I mean, I've seen the episodes, but I want to remind myself exactly what happened. I need to know the mind state of the characters too. The mindset of the characters, just because they go through so much in a given, season. I need to know where they're at mentally in order to go ahead and write the adventure that's happening.
And see where they are and what's going on and all. Yeah, that's cool. Could you tell me a little bit about your splatterpunk? I know They Kill is the book that won the award. It was
nominated. Yeah, it didn't win.
Nominated. Oh, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. But do you feel different with different genres of horror? What's your approach to doing something like splatterpunk?
Horror for me is just like colors to a painter. I mean, they're just all there. It's all there on the same palette, and the distinctions are, to me, because there's no distinctions for me. I may watch like I don't know, a Disney Channel horror movie that's made for little kids, and the next thing I'll be watching is like not rated, some of the most intense, awful horror that you could possibly imagine, and anything in between. And to me, it's all the same. It's all horror, and I love it. So when I write, especially when I write horror novels just for me, they're just full of all kinds of different stuff. So some parts of them might be more extreme than others. It'll be quiet horror and surreal horror and maybe some humorous horror. Who knows? So it's just like that. I don't, in my mind, I'm always surprised when people will say things like, "Oh, that was so extreme or splattery." I'm like, really? Because I just wrote it. I really wasn't thinking about that. So yeah, they're just colors. You can just kind of imagine me wildly throwing them on a canvas just to see what results,
Yeah. Does anything that you write scare you?
No. Things that scare me would be like if I use something, I don't know if scare is the right word, but emotionally affect me. But if I draw on something like from my own life that was just difficult, which is, I can do that in my fiction and nobody, maybe but my wife, ever knows. I may tell her, but nobody would ever know. But there are times where I've written stuff that, it's just hard because I lived through it. Even if I put it through the prism of fiction and nobody can tell.
You still know.
Yeah. And so that kind of thing. But in terms of, like literally being scared of anything I write, no, I don't think I ever have been.
I find that a lot of our horror writer friends are wonderful, terrific people and friendly and warm and accepting. And, that's a generalization, of course, for any kind of group. Do you feel that writing horror helps us to let out some of the crap that's stuck in our head and in our hearts?
I wouldn't be surprised. My wife does not like horror. She's not a fan, but she loves going to horror conventions because of what you said.
Oh, yeah.
She's found that people are the friendliest, kindest, sweetest people that she's ever met. And it may be because of that. I had a student years and years ago who said, "You write horror? You seem so pleasant." And I kind of smiled and said, "What do you think keeps me pleasant?"
Yeah, right.
Well, I really don't know. I sometimes think that it's the other way around, that because we're so pleasant, we're fascinated by the things that aren't. It's just, they're so different from what's inside us and what we see in the world, that it just draws our attention and fascinates us because it's hard to contemplate. We wrestle with it and try to understand it.
Yeah. And maybe that draws us to it more. That's interesting. Oh, that's cool. James has a question that he's just asked. Have you ever had a pitch for a tie-in that got rejected, that you retooled into an original idea?
That's a really good question. Have I ever done that? I've taken original ideas that I've had and never did anything with and then pitched them for stories. The second supernatural novel I did, Mythmaker, that basic idea was one I'd had for years. I just never did anything with it.
Yeah.
So I've done that before. I don't know if I ever have. I recycle things all the time. It drives my agent crazy. She's like, "You're using this name again." It's like, "Oh yeah, it's from this other pitch that we never did anything with, or never." So I recycle stuff so much, I often forget where it originally came from.
So you've got like a whole drawer full of notes which you can never look through and find. I know. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay. Nicholas wants to know which is your favorite Funko behind you. He loves your Funko collection.
Oh my God. My favorite one is the one I haven't got yet. But I have to, like I told you earlier before the reading started, I have to slow down because my wife won't let me keep him anywhere but in my office because she hates them. She thinks the black eyes are super creepy.
Yeah, true. That's
so one of the ones behind me, well, I have they're starting, I missed out on the original run of the Universal Monsters Funkos because I wasn't collecting them then, but they're starting to put them out like 1 or 2 a year, new ones. So they're right back behind me. And those are the monsters from my youth. So those are probably my favorite.
Okay, cool. Chris Ryan is expressing amazement that story was written this afternoon. He wants to know, how much rewriting did you do and what was your process under such a short deadline?
Well, I knew that if I had to, I could just go ahead and read something that wasn't Christmassy. Yeah. But I thought, I told Jim I would, and I really want to try. So since I knew the story had to be super short, all I did, I created several characters and then I pared them down. I originally had 2 kids and a dog and mom and dad.
Oh, that's too many. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't need them. So I just needed the 1 kid and I didn't need a dog. And then, I drew on things like my ex-mother-in-law was huge into Christmas. My ex-sister-in-law was the one who was mad at her family for lying to her about Santa Claus. still, well into her adulthood. And so,
Mhm.
I'm just kind of like was ransacking my brain for things about Christmas that I could use. And then I could use the idea of somebody who fabricated a fake reality for themselves about 30 years ago in a story. So I plundered that because I'm like, nobody knows that story anymore. So I plundered that idea and see if I can't recycle it for this one. And then as I wrote, I was just really careful of the word count. So I made sure that only a few things happened. Had to start pretty close to where the things happen. You can't start too far back.
Right.
With a short story, you always want as close to the end as you can anyway. And then you just sort of improvised a little as I went. Like I said, I wrote it in third person originally. Then I went and I guess I edited as I wrote it in the sense that I tossed ideas out before I put them in, since I know I didn't have a lot of time. I kept looking at the clock and saying, you got 5 hours. So get moving. Then I went back, and reread it several times and switched it to second person, reread it several times, but only for small things, really.
Yeah.
A lot of my writing happens in my head or happens ahead of time, so I tend not to revise a whole bunch afterwards. I tend to not need to.
Well, I just wrote a story yesterday thinking it was due yesterday, and it wasn't due till today. So I had all this extra time. So, but I bow at your feet writing this afternoon. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So John Lane asked you kind of a specific question. So he said, in your book, Writing in the Dark, you mentioned how your friends wanted the ending of Mr. Punch more clear, but not listening to them, you sold the story. Why did they say it wasn't clear enough?
They wanted it to be like everything explained. And none of them were horror writers. They were like either literary fiction writers or science fiction or fantasy writers. And, the narratives that they tend to like, not the literary ones so much, but the narratives that other genre writers tend to like are pretty, clear ones with clear cause and effect and things spelled out for them at the end. And I think they just couldn't grasp the weird symbolism of it. I couldn't either because it was the first time I did it. I mean, I felt right. I knew it was right, but I couldn't quite figure out to myself why it was right. I couldn't articulate it really well. I just understood. Years and years ago, later, I had a colleague who told me that I write according to the logic of the image, and he was a poet, and it made sense to me that he said that. I never thought about it because sometimes it's like
Logic of the I like that. That's a cool idea.
And I think that works really well for horror sometimes because so much of it's dreamlike and nightmarish. And those are the things that are in our nightmares often, is these weird images and then the emotions they spark in us. They're in the nightmare.
Cool. And I find it intriguing to a certain point to let people make their own decision, but what do they, because it's going to mean something different to each person, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Well, this has been so exciting. I every time I talk to you, I learn something new, which I think is really cool. And we have many people in the chat who are thanking you for your insights and your information and your fun story. That's all. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, we're going to bring you back on in the end, and we'll all talk again together. Linda Addison says, Tim is a writing machine. Yay, Linda. She's not lying. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our reading from Lisa Mannetti. Lisa Mannetti was a beloved writer from the HWA NY Chapter, who passed away earlier this year after a long illness. We are delighted to present a recording from 2016 of Lisa reading some of her work. Her debut novel, The Gentling Box, garnered a Bram Stoker Award, and she was nominated 6 times for the Prominent Award in both the short and long fiction categories. Among her notable short stories are Esmeralda's Stocking, Resurgam, The Hermit, and Arbeet macht frei, which received a Bram Stoker Award. Her work, including The Gentling Box, 1925, A Fall River Halloween, and The Box Jumper, has been translated into Italian. And The Box Jumper, a novella about Houdini, was not only nominated for a 2015 Bram Stoker Award and the prestigious Shirley Jackson Award, but it also won the Novella of the Year Award from This Is Horror in the UK. Lisa also wrote The New Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, 2 companion novellas in her collection Death Watch, a macabre gag book called 51 Fiendish Ways to Leave Your Lover, as well as nonfiction books and numerous articles and short stories in magazines, newspapers, and anthologies. Her website has more information about her various works at lisamanetti.com. Please join us in listening to this recording of Lisa reading from her.
So, I'll get as far as I can. This is about, for those of you who are Lizzie Borden or don't, I'll get as far as I can. This is about, for those of you who know anything about Lizzie Borden or don't, you know, the famous axe murderess. This is a story about a young girl who makes friends with Lizzie, and it's called 1925, A Fall River Halloween. Rich bitch, Delia Borden is a rich bitch. Give me that rich bitch, Borden, and I'll slap your face for you. No, get the axe and give her 40 whacks. Like her crazy cousin. She's not my cousin. Get out of here. Go home and kill your parents like your crazy cousin. Gravel, hastily scooped from a driveway on the hill, was flung hard, and it stung Delia's cheek. She dropped her school books and put her hand up to fend off the triple onslaught, but that gave the three little bitchy Trenton brats all the invitation they needed. Mary, the biggest and oldest, rushed her, shouting. Delia felt the heavy girl's fingernails clawing, heard the staccato sound of seams ripping as the shoulder... Uh-oh. We're in trouble now. Because I didn't bring my Gilda.
Moved or so electrifying.
Well, it's just my psychic ability.
Tall enough man to fit that.
Okay, so where are we? Okay, her dress was hanging down. Whatever, how I phrase it. She goggled at it briefly. Freddie Trenton, no stranger to fights, took advantage of her momentary lapse and felled Delia by kicking the back of her left knee. She went down, her chest thumping on the hard-packed driveway, her face buried in a narrow border of yellow, spicy-scented mignonettes. In a second, Mary was astride her back, knees clamped, righting Delia. She pushed Delia's face down to the dirt. Give it back, you bitch! What? Give what back? Delia tasted bitter leaves and loam. The invitation to our party. Francie saw you steal it. You weren't invited, rich bitch, Francie screamed. Mary's hand with her full weight behind it came down hard, an anvil on the back of Delia's neck. Delia saw the younger girl grabbing her splayed geography by its hardcovers and upending it, shaking the pages. Clearly, Francie anticipated the flutter of a square of bullseye orange construction paper with a yellow harvest moon pasted on it and a black silhouetted witch riding her broomstick across October sky. Practically every kid in the 6th grade class had gotten one just before recess ended this afternoon, but not Delia. It was pinned inside her undershirt. If they tore the front of her dress, they'd find it for sure. Delia began to cry. One of the twins, she thought it was Freddie, stepped on her hand. Where is it? Freddie dropped one by the water fountain. It fell out of his pocket when he was getting a drink and the bell rang to go in and I saw you pick it up. Mary and the twins were going to beat her to a pulp or strip her right here on the street to get that costume party invitation, or both. Delia closed her eyes. She'd been friends with Mary in Trenton until Delia moved into a big house on Belmont last year. She'd eaten dinner with the family, and once Mary had invited her for a sleepover. She and Mary played dress-up for hours in the attic. They swiped lavender writing paper from the desk, scented it with Mrs. Trenton's Cody Emerald toilet water, and used Freddie as their postman to deliver the note downstairs to his twin to come up for a tea soiree at 8 p.m. Francie, 2 years younger, cried because her feet were too small to clap around in Mrs. Trenton's cast-off high heels, until Mary called her a beanie, smacked her, gave her a kiss, a piece of butterscotch, and let her wear a long string of fake pearls. They'd all been friends when Delia lived next door on Wade Street, but Francie wasn't such a baby now. She was shorter, but at 10 years old, chubby enough for breast buds, and when she kneeled and leaned in close to shout in Delia's ear hole, her armpits reeked of musk and a yeasty smell poured out of her mouth. You better give it to us now, you stuck-up rich bitch. Francie slapped her hard, enough to make Delia's eyes water. Cry, baby, Freddie shouted. I'll give you something to cry about. Here's one in your eye. He hawked and then spit a juicy quarter-sized gobbet that landed on her forehead and drizzled into her hair and right eyebrow. Here, have one of my boogers to go with it. Francie dug around and mashed the dividend against her scalp. You ain't so grand now, but Delia, huh? Nothing to feel, she ain't got titties, Mary laughed. Disgusting. But spit and snot can be washed out. Anything but tearing the dress down the front. Here now, what's this, you gutter brats? Get off that girl, or I'll call the law. A voice from heaven. No, just Mrs. Brookings, looking like she stepped out of the Boston store, pushing the twins aside and tugging at Mary's shoulder until the painful weight was gone and Delia could at last sit up and catch a lungful of clean air. She scrambled to her feet. Where do you three live? I don't recognize you from this neighborhood, and I don't think you belong here, Mrs. Brookings said. You know them, Delia. Mary's in her class at school. We were just fooling, Freddie said. Mary shot him an elbow. Mrs. Brookings put an arm around Delia's waist. Well, you just go on and take your fooling somewhere else. Who wants to hang around here anyway, Mary said. Mrs. Brookings led Delia down the street away from the trend. Just you try showing up at our Halloween party and see what happens, you rich snoot, Freddie yelled. Delia didn't turn around, but Mrs. Brookings glared at the boy until he ran to catch up with his sisters. Space. Lizzie Borden was filling her bird feeder when Mrs. Brookings and Delia passed the big white house on French Street. Afternoon, Mrs. Brookings nodded at her. Delia smiled. Lizzie stared at Delia's torn dress and skin knees, but said nothing. It was less than a week to Halloween. Delia discovered the town library had 3 Denison's bogey books, so instead of walking straight home from school, where she might be ambushed by the Trentons just for spite, since she no longer carried the invitation, which was hidden behind the steam radiator in her bedroom, she sat in the reading room and mooned over crepe paper jack-o'-lanterns, caramel apples, and white velvet ghost costumes. The bogey book showed a world of perfection. Oh yeah, I was supposed to pass this around so everybody could have an idea what the hell I'm talking about with bogey books. Here, sorry. This was like from the 20s to the 50s thing. Oh, sorry. I'm somewhere here. Clever decorations were abundant, treat-laden tables beckoned, everyone joined in the games, no one was left out. Did Mrs. Trenton have a bogey book? Would she fashion the papier-mâché owl from the 60s, or paint a Halloween mirror? No. Delia knew that dark, cramped house, and Mrs. Trenton's lack of patience with screeching children. More likely there'd be toilet paper streamers hanging on the fence out back, some cider and an old bucket to bob for apples on the weedy Trenton back lawn, candy corn, a few nuts strewn among a couple of pumpkins on the picnic table. And periodically, Mrs. Trenton would yell from the back door, Mary, tell those kids to use the back house to use their business. I don't want them traipsing in here out the screen door. Nothing much. So why had she stolen the invitation? Partly to see what it looked like, partly to fantasize about going to a party in costume where, unrecognized under one of her mother's white bed sheets, she could mingle with the other kids. That would never happen. Freddie had sharp eyes. She'd be snagged inside of 5 seconds, and then who knew what they'd do with a bad mob to back them up, and no Mrs. Brookings to sail off her porch between the tall rigid columns, a one-woman armada bent on rescuing Delia. Mostly she recognized, she seeked the invitation, and was drowsing in the bogey books every day because she wanted you about having her own party. That was a laugh. Who would come? Practically everyone in the twins' class in the 6th grade was going to the Trentons' house. Who was left to invite, even if she could have a party? Just a couple of misfits, like the Portuguese kids who didn't speak much English, or one-eyed Gilda, who went trick-or-treating alone every year, wearing her eye patch and carrying her anti-stuffed parrot, or sporting a hook made from tinfoil, retreating from her father's Sunday coat. And if she gave a party next year, no matter how grand or how early she sent the invitations, no one would come. Her father had made some money in stocks and moved the family up on the hill, the snazziest section of town. The kids who lived around Waite Street snubbed her for being rich. The hill kids wouldn't play with her because she lived on Waite Street. There was no one. Delia closed the thin paper-covered book. Why not stitch it? Snitch it, sorry. Then she could look at it in her bedroom at night. She could bring it to school and pretend she was having the most marvelous party, strictly for the kids in her neighborhood who went to private schools. Maybe make the Trentons and the other kids drool with envy. Yes, my mother ordered special ice cream forms from the drugstore. We're having chocolate cupcakes with orange frosting, ice cold Coca-Cola, and Goblin Feast meat pies. Everyone will get a noisemaker and a surprise favor. And there's going to be a costume parade, and the winner takes home a silver pumpkin trophy and a $2 cash money prize, or they can have a certificate that's good for $3 worth of any kind of candy or ice cream or toys from my uncle's shop. She imagined them excited, clustered around her and saying, "Can I come, Delia? And me, I want to come. How about me, Delia? Weren't we always good, close friends?" And then she'd say, "Well, I have to ask my mother because this was no good either. They call her names and tease or worse, fly like ravens up the hill on Halloween night and laugh at her when there was no party." So she was stuck with the Trentons and everyone else. She'd be branded a liar till she finished high school, and maybe not even then. She was going to be an outsider, alone, for God, at least 6 years. Julia stood up, cheeks flushed in the overheated room. Her chest felt tight. She slipped the bogey book inside the pages of her speller and quickly donned her jacket. She wouldn't be able to come back here, not for a long time, because the librarian would know that Julia had taken the book. She ought to take 2 or 3 even, and then she could keep them for her very own. Her mother had covered her spelling book with brown paper, and the slim bogey books were hardly noticeable. She hugged the coveted secret to her chest and left the library, rushing down the stairs to North Main Street. Lizzie Borden's green sedan was parked out front. Whether she'd just been shopping or come from the library herself, Delia couldn't guess. But Lizzie was just settling in the back seat, and she rolled down the window when she saw Delia. "Little girl, you look like you could use some help. Are you the one those nasty little hellions chased and beat up last week?" "Yes, ma'am." "Would you like a ride?" The door opened and Delia climbed to the back seat next to Lizzie. "Ernest," she said to her driver, "we're taking this young lady home." "I know what it's like to be an outcast, to be alone," Lizzie said. She nodded toward a painting of a young woman, forlorn and isolated, sitting in a wooden skiff under a dreary sky. They were having tea and cookies in Lizzie's parlor, and the maid had just brought in 2 big slices of Lady Baltimore cake on delicate china plates. The fire crackled and snapped. The room seemed a cozy haven against the cold wind and the jeering children. Lizzie waited until they were alone again, and then she asked, "Why did they attack you, Delia?" Delia felt her face go hot. "Because you're a Borden," Lizzie finished for her. "Yes, that was it at first," Delia said. She told Lizzie about the Halloween party she'd been purposely excluded from, about the kids around shabby Wade Street who were angry over her defection to the Hill, about the Hill kids who snubbed her because she wasn't always rich. "My father had money too," Lizzie said, "and I lived on Front Street. I didn't have beaux because the neighborhood boys were beneath me, my father said. But the wealthy boys wouldn't come to our house because it was on the wrong end of town." Delia giggled. "We both lived in the same neighborhoods all our lives." "I think we should have our own club," Lizzie said. "Just you and me. What should we call it?" "The Borden Society." "To the Borden Society," Delia asked, raising her cup. They both sipped Shostanto tea. "Are we cousins, Miss Lizzie?" "Lisbeth, dear." "Never Lizzie." "And no, we're not cousins, but we can be good, no, great friends." Delia had found her new friend on Monday. Halloween was Saturday that year, but the Trentons' mystic rebel costume party had been planned for Friday night at 8 o'clock. Delia had no worries. After school on Tuesday, she went straight to Miss Borden's tall house. After a quick stop around the corner to her own, where she retrieved the bogey book she did in the gardener's shed that morning. "Miss Lisbeth is expecting you," Nellie said when Delia knocked on the porch door. Nellie led the way under the arch to the parlor, and Delia saw that the silver teapot was already steaming. A thin white wisp curled lazily over the spout. She sat with her hands folded over the books, and a moment later, Miss Lisbeth appeared. "These are very interesting," Lizzie said when Delia showed her the trove of bogey books. "How'd you find them?" Delia started to say that my mother got them and stopped. "All right. Everyone in town knew Lizzie was a liar and a thief. That her father had simply told the clerks in her favorite stores that if Lizzie walked out with her own little secret treasures, they weren't to stop her or arrest her or do anything except write down what she pinched and send him the bill. But that was no way to start a friendship. Besides, she hadn't looked or registered exactly, but what were the chances that the stupid librarian, with nothing to do all day, had overlooked stamping the inside covers 1,000 times with Fall River Public Library? None. "They're from the library," Delia said, feeling her face go red. "Yes, of course. Lizzie reached for another bogey annual at 30 or so pages. There weren't all that much to skim through, and said, well, why don't you come sit by me and let's decide which decorations we want to make and what the menu should be for our party. Our party? Certainly, and we'll have it on Friday at 8 o'clock. Perhaps 8:15 or 8:30, just to be chic. Space. Trent Grants be damned. Gilda skimmed up the hill toward the elegant house from the Morgan Street School the instant the clattering bell rang on Wednesday. Lizzie had gone to the same grammar school, and in a few years, Gilda would attend the same high school, and they lived in the same neighborhood, and they're both Mortons. All right, there were a million in town, but so what? And maybe they weren't cousins, but who cared? Who cared? They were going to be good, true friends forever. On Tuesday, Lizzie had already surprised Delia with a supply she had on hand. She was a quick worker when excitement was afoot, and Delia decided she must have sent Ernest and Nellie or Florence out to scour the shops between Fall River and Providence and return with the most marvelous Dennison crepe papers Delia had ever seen. Inky black, rich creamy white, screaming orange, and a whole lot more. They made the owl from the bogey book and started on devil horn jack-o'-lantern, and over their very animated tea time, they decided refreshments and dainties. Molded lobster salad, Halloween sandwiches, cut out circles of dark bread spread with cream cheese and black olives, salted nuts and frozen orange souffle. Lizzie had sure all would be ready, and that Nellie and Florence were absolute wizards when it came to concocting party favors and prizes and anything else the two friends wanted for their celebration. On Wednesday, Delia was stunned into jaw-dropping astonishment. Tea was served up on the second floor. The room had been transformed into a goblin's workshop with rolls of colored paper and fabric, muslin ghosts, heaps of black pipe clear spiders, cutouts, and orange table cards. It was all too much to take in at once. This is nothing, Lizzie flapped a hand. Wait till you see what the girls have done or are going to do with the parlor. I think what they've done so far is amazing, Delia said, nodding towards Florence, who sat at a long table, clever fingers rapidly plying the shears and scissoring colored paper into a variety of decorations. Lizzie looked delighted. I have a small surprise for you today and another tomorrow. She handed Delia a lightweight package wrapped in a swatch of orange crepe paper and tied with black ribbon. Delia slipped the book free and then whooped. It was a Dennison How to Make Crepe Paper Costumes book, the one volume the library didn't have. You pick out something grand. By the time you come over after school, you can try it on. Nellie and Florence are real magicians. You'll see. Delia looked through the papers, her eyes wide. This one. I mean, what do you think of this one, Miss Elizabeth? Lizzie smiled. A golden bumblebee fantasia. The wings would make it hard to hold on to railings or play games. It was elaborate enough to be for a first-class Boston operetta. It had a kind of shimmering Egyptian flair with its bands of vivid lapis blue and Nile jade, its Cleopatra-style headdress. Complicated pleats, folds, and cuffs. Lizzie said, why, it's fit for a pretty princess, and Halloween's only once a year, and if you want to wear it, we can make it. Delia left. Oh, Miss Elizabeth, I don't know what to say. You're simply grand. She kissed the old woman's cheek. Lizzie's hand darted up to her own face, her fingertips grazing skin. Her hand hung in the air and fluttered like smoke, as if she were puzzled, as if it had been a long time since she felt human touch, a long time since she witnessed spontaneous human affection, the kind that carried a friend away. Then her hand fell delicately. Lizzie smoothed the girl's hair and looked into her shining eyes. Thursday was the last happy day that Julia knew, not just for weeks or months, but years, so perhaps guilt and self-awareness drove her to the Mount Hope Bridge, and the golden bumblebee fantasy costume brought her to her final flight. In school, the other kids were talking about the Trenton party and trying to make her feel lousy about not going. But she whistled through the day, a smile on her face. They teased her until she finally said, I have a golden Fantasia costume from the Dennison books, and I'm going to be going to a very important, exclusive party, so there. That would shut them up, she thought. She didn't count on Freddie's sleuthing abilities. His sisters had left him alone too much that week, and while they fussed with the cheap decorations they drew on butcher paper and the paper bag masks and costumes they made, poor Freddie had trailed Delia a few times and knew she was going somewhere that week. He didn't know exactly whose house it was, but it was on French Street up the hill. On Thursday afternoon at lunchtime, you know what, I'm going to skip this part so I can finish the story. It's going to go too long. She gets the invitation. And I realize I'm reading to a much younger crowd that probably had no idea what this is all about, like making things for Halloween, which is why I passed the book around. So it was a really big deal to do a lot, and they're actually very elegant. But if you see the book, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's get right ahead. She's all happy about this new shop. She's excited. She's gonna have a new thing. Miss Elizabeth had told her it was important to be fashionably late, but not to the point of rudeness late. 15 minutes was exactly right. 7 was more than Gilda could stand, so at 8:37, the bell rang at 306 French Street. The house was dark, the wind was up that night, but when she remembered it was Halloween, or almost, she decided it was just right for a wonderful spooky party. Nellie was a long time coming to the door. Shifting from foot to foot, anxious, Delia rang again, and again. And maybe Miss Elizabeth was still getting ready. Or maybe she was waiting for the servants to get into hiding places to scare Delia and get the evening's revels off to a heart-galloping start. After what seemed like another 5 minutes, Nellie came and opened the door partway. She came out on the stairs and she stood next to Delia. Miss Delia, she began, I don't know how to tell you this, but Miss Elizabeth is terrible sick. Terrible sick. But inwardly, Delia was crumpling. I know, but she says you can have the party tomorrow night. But tomorrow night, a lot of other kids will be trick-or-treating. We'll get interrupted. She didn't want to say that she didn't want the other kids to find out, even inadvertently, whose party, whose house she was frequenting. But tonight is the night. Tonight! I'm sorry. Nellie shook her head. She said to take this in the meantime. She handed Delia a beautifully made black satin goodie bag that was an upside-down witch's hat brimming with candy and treats. Delia scarcely looked at it. She's very old, Delia, and I guess the excitement was too much for her. It's her heart, I think. I hope not, but I think it's her heart. Nellie went inside and closed the door. Well, I have a heart too, Delia said. She sat on the steps. She began to cry. Over the next half hour, she got up twice and rang the bell again, but no one ever came. By 9 p.m., the Trenton party was petering out. The apples had been unsuccessfully dunked for, but successfully thrown at the fence and a few of the rowdier kids. The games were played, the treats were all eaten, the goblin punch, cider with a few wrinkled shrunken plums and a lot of water, was finished. Most of the kids had already gone home, but Mary wasn't ready for her party to end. Freddie had jokingly checked each arriving guest with a flip of their masks or a peek under their newspapers or sheets to make sure it ain't that sneaking rich bitch Delia Borden. And that gave her an idea. Let's find out where Miss Rich Bitch is at her party and go there. She shrieked in a burst of inspiration. I know where, Freddie said, and he took off. A few of the kids backed out when they learned after a couple of blocks the destination was the ex-murderess' house. But the Trentons and 3 other Wade Street cohorts pressed on, running up towards the hill. Delia had finally stopped crying. She was just getting up from the stairs and only begun to realize for the first time it probably was a great idea to sit on concrete steps in a crepe paper costume. She was on the sidewalk near the drive when the Trenton brats hove into view from the cross street and came tearing at her. The witch's basket was knocked from her hands first. Say, Freddie taunted, I would eat that old witch's food for all the money in Providence. Everyone knows she was a poisoner. Laughter, jeers. Freddie scooped up the candy and began pelting Delia with it. The wings of the costume tore when she put up her arms and hands to shield her face, and Francie sneaked a punch through the crepe paper flutter. My costume, she cried. Costume? All you need is an axe and a paint-stained dress. No, they never found the dress. Yeah, because her big shot rich bitch cousin burned it up. Chanting now, not singing. Lizzie Borden, talk and act. A light went on in Miss Elizabeth's glass porch. Charles, one of her servants, came to the door, angrily shouting, Get out of here, I'm warning you. I'm calling the police this minute. The bunch of no goddamn good hoodlums. Get out of here, I'm calling the police, I tell you. He slammed the door. They scattered. Delia tried to begin the march home, but there were catcalls and taunts and the occasional rock whizzing by until she ran to her own front door, got inside and locked the door. Long before school started again on Monday, she knew it would be all over town that Delia had been visiting the outcast, the presumed axe murderess. Fall River stuck by Lizzie long enough to see her through her acquittal, but they shrugged among themselves, who else could have done it? who hated the fat old reclusive Abby enough to chop her 19 times. Then an hour and a half later, wheeled the axe again while Andrew snored on the narrow sofa in the parlor, oblivious to his wife's death and his own impending execution. Who indeed? Everyone in town knew that Eli Bentz had testified during Lizzie's preliminary hearing that she tried to buy prussic acid in his pharmacy just before the murders. They also knew from the neighbors that same week that fat old Abby had run across the street after she and Andrew had been vomiting for a night to call on Dr. Bowen and tell them how they'd been poisoned. Bowen chalked it up to the heat and spoiled food. Delia went to bed in tears, feeling angry and betrayed. The taunts echoed round and round her head. "I'll give you something to cry about," Freddie screamed over and over. By morning, Delia decided she was going to give Lizzie her due. Something to cry over. Something to really get sick over. Lizzie was a sneak and a liar, and it was all Lizzie's fault that no one liked Delia and never would. Never. And if she was related to Lizzie, so be it. Poisoning was in her veins, bone deep. Rough on rats, brimful of arsenic was in her garage. Natalie shook her head again on Saturday when Delia appeared at the door. But Delia was prepared for that eventuality, and the bedraggled costume was part of her cover. "I know it's usual to give out treats on Halloween," Delia said sweetly, "but I thought that since Liz was ill, I'd give her a treat." She held out the black satin witch goodie bag filled with apples and cookies and a few wrapped candies, every bit of it laced with arsenic. And there would be more to come because she intended to drop by again for tea, see how her friend and neighbor was doing. Nellie told her it was a good idea. Delia stopped by several more times for tea that autumn. By then, her experimenting proved successful, and there were certainly no rats to be found around the Belmont Street garage. She discovered, too, how easy it was to slip spoonfuls of rough-on rats into the last sips in delicate china cups rimmed with gold, into silver teapots, sugar bowls, and atop the elderly hostess' own slice of yellow cake, while smiling and calmly talking about Thanksgiving and the approaching holidays, about school, about her favorite lines from her favorite poem by Mr. Percy Bysshe Shelley, "O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind?" On February 4th, 1926, Elizabeth A. Borden entered Truesdale Hospital for gallbladder surgery. She never fully recovered. Her hair turned gray, she lost weight, and to the bewilderment and consternation of her doctors, all that spring she remained ill, in suffering, lingering until her death on June 1st, 1927. She was 66 years old.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to that recording of Lisa reading from 2016. I had forgotten that she had, in fact, handed around a book of classic Halloween decorations that were relevant to the story because it played such a big part in the story she was reading.
That's fun. So much energy.
Yeah, she's a great reader. She read with our chapter several times, so this was I think the best one that we got on video. And I owe a shout out to Stephen Van Patten. Oh, and here's Stephen. I see him just popped up, who coordinated our reading, the recordings of our readings, and Stephen's friend Harold, who came out to several of our readings and set up the video camera and just captured this stuff for the record. So it's really exciting that we're able to finally share one of those readings with the Galactic Terrors audience.
Cool.
So, all right. Well, I think we're just about coming to a close, and I'd love to hear what Tim and Sephirah have coming up next. Tim, do you have any new projects you can talk to us about?
Well, I have my next tie-in novel is called Planet Havoc. It's set in the world of the Zombicide Invader card game. So that's, space warriors fighting space zombies. That's coming out in April. And then my next horror novel from Flame Tree Press is called We Will Rise. It's about a ghost apocalypse, ghosts appearing all over the world and causing all kinds of trouble. That comes out in July. And sometime in 2022, the Writing in the Dark workbook, the follow-up to Writing in the Dark, should be out.
Excellent. And Tim, I feel like I owe you an apology or some kind of trophy, because I never intended for you to have to write a story last minute.
No,
I should have been clearer about the timing up front months ago, so you had to.
No, it was fun. I'm glad. I was glad to do it.
Rise into the challenge.
Yes, and thank you for doing it. And I loved the story and the title. Just like everybody else, I thought as soon as I heard the title, I was giddy.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah.
Mhm. Cool. So that's exciting. Wait, does this count as published? Wait a minute.
Probably,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
Our first story debut on Galactic Terrors. Thank you, Tim.
You set a high bar, Tim.
Jack to follow.
We all got to write a story if we're coming on.
I mean, not like Sephirah, who's slacking, just picked up some story she wrote in 2017. And,
Yeah. Crossed out a few pages. There you go.
You guys are a riot. It's fun having you on. Yeah. Sephirah, what about you? Do you have something new coming up, or what's your most latest thing you want to tell us about?
As you said in the little preamble there, during these pandemic times, I've been working on screenplays, two TV show pilots and maybe 3 or 4 movies now. I'm just working away trying to get them good so that, if I ever meet anyone who cares, here. And actually, funny enough, they're not like, one's a comedy, one's kind of like a Jurassic Park amusement park disaster idea, and so they're not all horror. They're bits and pieces. One of the TV pilots is a horror, the other is a science fiction kind of thing, and but it's always dark. Yeah. Nothing good ever happens. And I'm finishing up a novel, which I'm hoping I haven't quite. They don't know yet, but I'm hoping it'll go on the Scream or the Kiss app, where Experiments in Terror is. Experiments in Terror, the cover you showed before I read, that's the cover that's on Scream, SCREAM, Thrills and Chills app. You get it on your phone. And it's also now on the Kiss, KISS app as well. So it's the same company, so they're doing things on both. So it's a new kind of world to reading books on your phone, and they're not exclusive, so anyone can put, if you got a horror book, send it to Scream. Why not? It's another place for people to read. So anyways, I'm finishing up a novel that I hope will go there first and see if they like it. It's written kind of in the theme I feel they would enjoy. And then I'm working on a couple of other more, we all always keep working on lots of things. A couple of novels I'm working on and so on. Trying to think something I should really be pushing, but I guess, yeah. So the story I wrote, the story I read tonight, Gilda and the Prince, was originally supposed to be, this is one of those learning lessons for people trying to break into writing. So it was a story specifically written for an erotic anthology. And of course the anthology died before it got to print. So then I thought, oh man, I'm not shopping this thing around, because I wrote it specifically for them. So I'm just going to self-publish it. So that's why it's on Amazon. I just thought, well, let's see how it goes. So it's not long enough to be a novella, but it's a little longer than a short story. And I also just want to say that the wall behind me, the stones, everyone's talking about going to StokerCon in Denver, Colorado. I'm really hoping to get there. I'm in Canada, so let's hope we get that border crossing happening. But I took this picture. This is from the cemetery in New Orleans when it wasn't called StokerCon yet, but it was the Stoker Awards World Horror Convention combo deal in New Orleans. And this is the stones for, we think it's one of the many places that's Marie Laveau's tomb. I think they showed us 3 different ones. so this could be hers. It could not. I don't know. So I think it's fun to show it, because it reminds me of how much fun I had that trip. And if you're on the fence about going to a StokerCon, get off that fence and come and, hang with your tribe. It is so much fun, these horror conventions. As Tim was saying, the horror people are the funniest, fun, friendly, I never laugh so hard as I do at a horror convention, which I know sounds crazy, but yeah, just come to StokerCon and hang out.
Well, the line between horror and comedy is thin sometimes. So.
Oh yeah, very thin. That's why there's a lot of horror comedy too, I guess, right?
Exactly.
And Nicholas Dyack just threw in the chat, come to the Anne Radcliffe gathering at StokerCon as well. Yeah.
We should definitely plug that. Nicholas and Michelle Brittany coordinate the Anne Radcliffe Academic Conference every year and do a great job. And Stephen Van Patten conveniently reminded me, I could not remember Harold's last name, so we'll just pop that up. Many thanks to Harold Williams, who did the video recording.
Harold's great.
And we could also give a shout out to Lou Rera, who does all of our video production and editing and stuff that you see. And Lou actually took the Lisa's reading was in 2 separate files, and he took that and put it together, and it's seamless. Looks like one beautiful file, and he added the titles and stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Lou. And Lou created our opener and our close and all the little author intros. So he's a whiz with video stuff.
Yeah, Lou was hanging with our Ontario chapter for a few years there too. So he'd come here and help with the booths. And one year he designed this amazing sign for our Fan Expo booth. Yeah, he's a great guy. I really like Lou.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's funny because he's in the New York chapter too, but he's actually closer to you.
I know. He
area,
was hopping over for meetings sometimes. Yeah.
So.
We had a few New Yorkers coming to our Ontario meetings over the years. It's pretty funny. That's how I met Greg Lamberson so many years ago, and he put me in a couple movies. So you just never know who you're going to meet at, these conventions and at our chapter meetings and everything else. HWA is the way to be if you're into horror.
That's true.
Okay. The requisite cat sighting. We have a black cat. She doesn't like to be on camera, so I hope you Well, I'm just thrilled with the different stories that we had tonight. So many different things and so many exciting things, and it never ceases to amaze me that these words come out of our brains and out of your wonderful, wonderful hearts. And thank you for sharing with us.
Yes, thank you very much, Tim. Especially, a special story for us. Much appreciated.
Yeah, very cool.
I owe you a drink of your choice at StokerCon.
Yeah, that
Giant
sounds good.
drink.
Yeah.
A mug.
That's it. if you make it, if you can escape Canada long enough, I will treat you to a drink as well, Sephirah.
Yay! I can't wait to hang with my peeps again.
All right. And our next Galactic Terrors will be January 13th, and we'll be announcing our lineup soon, where Carol and I are working on the 2022 schedule. We have some exciting authors on tap.
Yes, that we're firming up. And you guys believe it's almost next year?
No, this year flew by.
It really did, even though I haven't left my apartment in 2 years.
If you'd like to be notified for upcoming Galactic Terrors news, please sign up for the newsletter. And Carol sends that out just twice a month, once to announce the next reading, and then a few weeks later just as a reminder, so we're not going to spam you. At least we promise to try not to spam you. And of course, click subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. I think you all heard there was a major outage on the Amazon Web Services the other day this week. It affected a lot of the country. I have it on good authority that's directly related to us having too few likes and subscribes on the Galactic Terrors channel. So if you'd like to avoid future Amazon Web Services outages, please subscribe to the Galactic Terrors YouTube channel.
Yes. And while you're there on the Galactic Terrors YouTube channel, all of our shows are recorded. So please feel free to tell your friends about this particular show and check out some of the ones from past, because we have so much fun with these and we're so thrilled to have wonderful authors on like Tim and Sephirah. So we're very lucky.
So, and if you'd like to catch up on what the HWA NY chapter is doing, you can visit our website at hwany.org.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to our audience for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Tim and Sephirah, thanks again for reading with us. We appreciate it. We're taking the time out from a busy time of year. I know you both have a lot going on.
Well, thank you for having us. It was great. Thank you so much.
So hopefully we'll have you back again soon.
I'd love to.
Yep, sounds good.
And I'll write a story that day just because.
Yeah, I'll dig up an old one, like from like 20 years ago.
That's
what I'll do.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have references to, like, listening to a Walkman and using a rotary phone.
Right.
I had to stand up to change the channel on the TV.
My little brother was the remote. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care
you.
and enjoy the rest of 2021.
All right.
Happy holidays.
Bye, everybody.